This programme has been plugging away at this story for some time to come, and now we have seen that hundreds of residents at a housing complex in West London are now having to move out while fire safety and structural problems are investigated. This is people living in the Paragon complex in Brentford. They're being evacuated after faulty cavity barriers which prevent flames spreading were found. Stephen Mackenzie is a fire safety consultant, chief executive of Global Fire Forum. Very good evening to you.
Good evening.
Do you understand a bit more about the technical reasons for why these people have had to be evacuated?
Well, since the breaking news this morning, it's still evolving, and it's quite confused whether it's limited to the cladding system, which we believed was previously replaced, or it's the cavity barriers, or it's a combination of internal fire safety issues at this block.
Is it a case that the rules have changed after it was built and that people have gone back and thought, actually, that's not as safe as we would require, or was it just not safe to begin with?
Well, we've actually seen a number of shocks and stressors following Grenfell. Many argue that most of the tower blocks impacted by combustible cladding did indeed comply with legislation before 2017. We have seen the government amend legislation in 2018, 2019, 2020, and it's now becoming incredibly confusing between what was historically deemed to satisfy the standards at the time of construction with the legislative uplifts that the government's imposing now. Therefore, people are getting caught out with second, third, fourth, fifth shocks and stressors or shock waves following Grenfell.
That therefore could mean that there are hundreds, thousands of buildings, not just housing, but certainly hospitals too, that may well fall short of the requirements that are now deemed necessary.
Yes, definitely. We know that there's approximately 457 buildings with Grenfell-type ACM. We know that there's been 2,700 applications to the Building Safety Fund for non-ACM. We see the government now giving testimony to the Commons Parliamentary Accounts Committee, suggesting that they've been advising since 2017 assess all buildings at all heights. We've been speaking out, and more recently in the past 2 weeks, I've written to the Prime Minister calling for a public inquiry over fire safety concerns in hospitals, which have been ongoing for over a decade. We have a number of hospitals out there, new under the PFI schemes, which have rampant fire safety defects, which actually compromise patient safety. We also have London Fire Brigade recently conducted a review of all residential care homes in London and found over 50% to be defective. It's issues that is affecting hospitals, homes,
and Stephen, sorry to interrupt, but that is horrendous, mind-blowing actually. And certainly at the time of Grenfell, in the immediate aftermath, there were considerations about having to evacuate people from hospitals if the buildings were deemed to be unsafe as a result of what happened around Grenfell. So there was a consideration about that at the time. But are we suggesting that the builders of these buildings knew that they were unsafe but built them anyway and got around the regulations, or the regulations have caught up with them?
I think it's actually a bit of both. There's been some gross negligence or criminal misconduct on the behalf of constructors and their subcontractors, and that's why we see in Scotland that 2 major PFI projects are now subject to a full public inquiry, and a third hospital in England took over 2 years to remediate the fire safety issues, and it was one of 6 expert witness cases that I'm aware of. There is also the issues that standards have now uplifted in a knee-jerk reaction to Grenfell, and everybody's losing sight of what is safe, what is compliance, and what is the requirements now. The government sat on just under 1,500 non-ACM test samples in 2019 and didn't actually release reports until 2020. So we're massively concerned that a number of buildings that have had ACM remediated will be caught out with other cladding systems, and the mental health shocks and stressors to the residents facing these bills, bankruptcy, homelessness, is enough to push.
Well, I was just going to say, just finally, the impact on people's property price, the value they built up in their home, if they are subsequently told, really sorry, it's so unsafe that you have to leave it. I mean, that traps people in their homes for well, forever possibly, if they can't, if it's got no value whatsoever.
Yeah, we've seen this after the Chalcott's evacuation the week after Grenfell, where 6 tower blocks were evacuated and decanted into emergency accommodation. Now take that as happened in a private block, or thousands of blocks across the country, where lenders are giving zero valuations, insurers are refusing to insure, people can't sell, they can't buy, and we now have solicitors saying that if you sell, we will pursue you for any future cladding costs. People are trapped, people are desperate, and the government today has reiterated that they're liable for reasonable costs, but can't tell us what those costs will be and what is reasonable to the government. We find it's a civil contingency chaos, which is now a civil contingency farce, and after 3 years, the government still hasn't stepped up.
Okay. Astonishing, isn't it? Stephen, thank you so much. Stephen Mackenzie, Fire Safety Consultant, Chief Executive of the Global Fire Forum.